Welcome back to the Real Life English podcast. Think about the last time you felt your phone vibrate in your pocket.
Oh, yeah.
You reach in, you pull it out, and the screen is just completely blank.
The classic phantom vibration.
Exactly, a total phantom vibration. Your brain was anticipating a digital interaction so intensely that it literally hallucinated a physical sensation right against your skin.
It's actually kind of terrifying when you think about it.
It really is. And I mean, that is the exact level of neurobiological enmeshment we're dealing with today. We're operating with this Paleolithic nervous system, right?
Right. A brain that evolved to track maybe 150 people in a local tribe.
Yes. But now it's hardwired into this massive global algorithmic network. And it's basically engineered to hijack our threat and reward centers 24 hours a day.
Which is just a profound evolutionary mismatch.
Yeah.
I mean, the phantom vibration syndrome, that's just a physical manifestation of a much deeper psychological reality we're all living in.
Mm-hmm.
We are constantly carrying around this device that acts as an ambient monitor of our social standing.
Right, which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. Because the question of self-esteem in the digital age, it's not just about feeling a little insecure after seeing a nice vacation photo on your feed.
No, not at all. It's about a chronic, low-grade activation of your survival circuitry.
Exactly. So today, we are taking the stack of research and behavioral data from our sources to map the mechanics of exactly how these platforms exert such a gravitational pull over our self-worth.
And we really want to move past that surface-level advice, that whole just remember it's not real thing.
Oh, I hate that advice. It doesn't work. We want to examine the friction between our executive function, which logically knows a feed is curated, and our limbic system, which processes it as visceral life-or-death social data.
Right. But we're also going to look at the other side of the equation.
Yeah.
Because the digital environment isn't fundamentally just a trap.
Right. It can be an amplifier.
Exactly. We'll break down how these same networks can be manipulated to actually reinforce your self-worth. And we'll outline some specific neurohacks from our sources to sort of decouple your dopamine baseline from the algorithm.
I love that phrase you used earlier, though, gravitational pull. It's incredibly apt here because gravity is invisible, right? It's continuous.
And you don't actively decide to experience it.
Well,
You're just subject to it.
yes. Which brings us right to the core mechanic outlined in the research, the trap of subconscious comparison.
Right. And to understand this, we need to completely discard this outdated idea that social media is just a highlight reel.
Which is funny because that's the metaphor everyone uses.
It is, but it implies a passive viewing experience, right? Like
Yeah.
watching a movie. But what's actually happening in your brain is an active computational crisis in its social processing centers.
Okay, I want to push on that distinction a bit because for a decade, the standard pop psychology advice has been you're comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel.
Right, we've all heard that.
Yeah, and it's a neat metaphor, but it always felt insufficient to me. Like, if I watch an actual movie trailer, I don't spiral into an existential crisis because my life doesn't feature Hans Zimmer music and, CGI explosions.
Obviously not.
My brain easily categorizes the movie as fiction, so why does the brain fail to categorize a highly filtered, curated Instagram post the same way, even when we actively know it's filtered?
Well, it comes down to the specific neural pathways involved in social cognition, particularly the medial prefrontal cortex.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So when you watch a movie, your brain isn't calculating your position in a social hierarchy relative to, like, Tom Cruise's character.
Right, because he's not in my tribe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But social media platforms utilize the avatars of our actual peers, or at least parasocial peers. And the brain's social evaluation network evolved under conditions where visual evidence of success,
Like someone having more food.
right, more food, a better shelter, higher status in the tribe, that visual evidence was a direct zero-sum threat to your own survival.
Ah, because in a tribe of 100 people, if someone else is suddenly dominating the social hierarchy, your access to resources might literally diminish.
Precisely. We are governed by what evolutionary biologists refer to as Dunbar's number.
Oh, I've heard of this. This is the cognitive limit to the number of people we can maintain stable relationships with, right?
Yes, usually estimated around 150. Your brain is perfectly calibrated to assess your standing within a group of roughly that size.
Okay.
But now you open a social media feed, and in a 10-minute scroll, you are exposed to the extreme, absolute peak experiences physical attributes, and career milestones of thousands of individuals.
Oh, wow. So you're forcing a cognitive engine built for a 150-person local network to process the top 0.01% of global human achievement.
And it processes them as if they were your immediate neighbors.
That is wild. It's like trying to run a modern, hyper-realistic video game on a computer processor built in 1995.
That's a great analogy.
The CPU just totally overheats. The brain is frantically trying to render the social hierarchies of 10,000 people at once. And it's using an algorithm that says, if you are not keeping up with the people in your visual field, you are in danger of being exiled from the tribe.
And that cognitive overheating is exactly what drives the drop in self-esteem. The comparison process isn't an intellectual exercise for your brain.
It's just automatic.
It's an autonomic reflex, yeah. You don't consciously decide to evaluate your self-worth against a post.
So it's happening before I even realize it.
The moment your visual cortex registers the image of a peer's perceived success, the amygdala and the striatum have already processed the social delta.
The gap between their status and yours.
Exactly. They process that gap before your prefrontal cortex can even begin to formulate the thought, oh, they probably used a ring light and took 50 takes.
Man, and the sheer volume of data points just accelerates that erosion. I mean, if you experience one social defeat in the physical world, say, a colleague gets a promotion you wanted.
Right, that hurts.
Yeah. It hurts, but you have days or weeks to process it, rationalize it, and recover your equilibrium.
You have time.
Yeah. But scrolling subjects you to micro defeats every 3 seconds. A friend's new house, an influencer's impossible physique, a former classmate's startup funding.
It's relentless.
Yeah.
And the logical brain is incredibly slow compared to the emotional brain.
Right. By the time logic catches up to explain away one post, your thumb has already swiped past 4 more.
Which is why those silent questions like, am I doing enough? Am I successful enough? Am I attractive enough? They aren't formed as conscious anxieties.
How do they manifest then?
They manifest as a generalized, somatic sense of inadequacy. You close the app, and you don't necessarily think, I am less successful than John.
You just feel bad.
Yeah, you feel a localized heaviness in your chest, maybe a sudden fatigue or a spike of irritability. The damage to your intrinsic self-value happens way below the waterline of conscious awareness.
That is so insidious. Let's pivot a bit from how we consume to how we produce, because the sources heavily emphasize that passive scrolling is only half the architecture of this environment.
Oh, absolutely.
The other half is what happens when we actively enter what the research calls the validation economy.
Right, the validation economy. This is where the neurobiology gets truly manipulative.
Because when we post content, we transition from being observers of the social hierarchy to active participants.
Exactly, we start demanding our position within it.
And we should clarify for the listener that seeking validation isn't inherently pathological, right? Like it's a core human drive.
Of course it is. We want the nod of approval from a mentor or the laugh from a friend at a dinner party. That's normal.
But the digital validation economy takes that organic, nuanced social feedback and compresses it into these stark, frictionless, quantitative metrics. Likes, views, retweets.
It essentially reduces human connection to operant conditioning.
Like a lab rat pressing a lever.
Yes. The platforms operate on the exact same psychological principles as a slot machine. They specifically utilize a variable ratio reward schedule.
Okay, unpack that variable schedule for us.
Well, when you pull the lever on a slot machine, you don't know if you're going to win or how much you're going to win. That uncertainty creates a massive anticipatory spike of dopamine in the brain's reward pathway.
Mainly the nucleus accumbens, right?
Correct.
And I think this is where the mechanics of dopamine are often totally misunderstood by people. Like, we usually equate dopamine with pleasure.
Right, the feel-good chemical.
Yeah, people think you get a like, you get dopamine, you feel good. But the research points out that dopamine is actually about anticipation and motivation, isn't it?
That's a crucial distinction. It's the chemical of wanting, not necessarily liking. Dopamine drives the behavior of seeking.
So it's not the reward itself.
Exactly. The moment you press post, your brain enters a state of heightened arousal. You've placed your social capital on the roulette wheel. Your brain releases dopamine, not when you get the like, but in the anticipation of checking your phone to see if you got the like.
Which perfectly explains the compulsion to check the app 5 minutes after posting.
Yes.
And this ties directly into the concept of the reward prediction error, doesn't it?
It does. Let's walk through that.
Okay, so if my brain predicts I'll get 50 likes based on my past posts, and I open the app and see 60, I experience a positive prediction error.
Right. a surge of positive emotion. You feel very secure in your tribe.
But if I predict 50 and I only see 5,
Then you experience a negative reward prediction error. Your dopamine levels crash completely below your baseline.
and what does that crash actually feel like?
Yeah.
Physically.
The physiological experience of that crash is identical to the feeling of social rejection.
Wow, so it hurts.
It really hurts.
Hmm.
In the context of evolutionary psychology, being ignored by the tribe is the precursor to being abandoned by the tribe.
Which meant death.
Literally. So a low engagement metric isn't processed logically as, oh, my friends were busy and didn't open the app today.
How is it processed?
It is processed by the limbic system as I am being ostracized.
Okay, but I want to challenge this framework just a bit, because isn't the physical world also a validation economy?
How do you mean?
Well, if I tell a joke at a party and nobody laughs, I experience that same negative reward prediction error. I feel embarrassed, my dopamine crashes. What makes the digital validation economy fundamentally more destructive to our self-esteem than the natural social rejections we've faced for millennia?
That's a great question. It really comes down to a question of scale, velocity, and ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. Think about it. In the physical world, social feedback is rich with context. If you tell a joke and people don't laugh, you can see their body language.
Right.
Maybe the music was too loud, maybe they were distracted, or maybe you could see them wince in a way that says too soon.
So I have contextual data to rationalize the failure.
Yes, exactly. On social media, the feedback is binary and totally context-free.
Uh.
A lack of likes is just a void.
And the human brain hates a void.
It's a meaning-making machine. When faced with an ambiguous void, an insecure brain will automatically fill that void with the worst-case scenario. They hate me. I'm ugly. I'm irrelevant.
Plus, the digital metrics are public and permanent. Like, if my joke bombs at a party, it just disappears into the ether.
Joke.
But if my post bombs, the low metric sits there like a digital monument to my social inadequacy for anyone to see. It compounds the shame.
Exactly. And this leads us to what is probably the most frustrating dynamic highlighted in the sources, the paradox of awareness.
Oh, this is the exact friction between the executive function and the limbic system we mentioned earlier. The paradox of awareness basically posits that our logical comprehension of how the platform works offers zero emotional armor against it.
It's a really bitter pill to swallow, especially for highly educated, highly rational people.
Because you can read the white papers on algorithmic feed optimization.
You can completely understand the A/B testing engineers used to design the notification batches.
You can logically know that a person's worth cannot be calculated by an integer on a screen.
Yet when you post a photo you felt really good about, and it receives negligible engagement, you still feel the sting.
It's the ultimate proof that we cannot think our way out of a biological response.
No, we really can't.
It's like, I can logically know that a roller coaster is securely bolted to the track. I know it's statistically safer than driving a car.
Right.
But when I'm plummeting down a 100-foot drop, my heart rate is going to spike and my stomach is going to drop because my nervous system perceives free fall.
Logic does not negate the visceral reality of the drug.
Exactly.
That's the exact mechanism at play here. The prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of the brain, is an evolutionary newcomer. It's slower and requires high energy to function.
While the limbic system is ancient.
Ancient, lightning fast, and it bypasses logic to ensure immediate reaction. So when you receive a negative social signal online, the limbic system fires the pain response before the prefrontal cortex can even boot up to say, hey, remember the algorithm.
Wow. Which honestly brings us to a really critical crossroads in this deep dive.
Where's that?
Well, if our biology is this heavily mismatched against the technology, and if our logic cannot protect our self-esteem from these variable reward schedules and the subconscious comparisons, then the logical conclusion feels incredibly bleak.
It does sound a bit hopeless.
It feels like these platforms are inherently toxic by design, like they're acting as digital parasites on our social hardware. Should we simply be opting out entirely?
I mean, if the analysis stopped there, opting out would be the only rational conclusion.
But it doesn't stop there.
No. The sources pivot significantly here. They urge a more nuanced understanding of neuroplasticity and environmental design.
Okay, let's explore that.
We have to examine the silver lining, which argues that the technology itself is agnostic. It is basically an empty vessel.
So the psychological devastation isn't guaranteed.
Not at all. It's entirely a product of the specific parameters of the environment we are exposed to.
Ah, the idea that your environment shapes your mindset. I really want to unpack this because it's not just a feel-good platitude, right? There is rigorous behavioral science behind it.
There absolutely is.
Yeah.
Let's look at the concept of hyper-niche connection.
Okay.
In the physical world, geography is a harsh constraint on social validation.
Meaning you're stuck with whoever happens to live near you.
Right. So if you have a highly specialized interest, a marginalized identity, or just a really rare life experience, the statistical probability of finding a peer group in your immediate geographic vicinity is incredibly low.
Right. Like if you are dealing with a specific autoimmune disorder, or, I don't know, you're deeply invested in restoring 19th century clockwork,
Very specific.
or you are navigating a very specific career pivot, you might be the only person in a 20-mile radius dealing with that reality.
And that geographic isolation breeds a profound sense of abnormalcy.
Yeah.
You feel alien.
And prolonged isolation doesn't just make you sad, it alters your neurochemistry.
Yes. It elevates cortisol and suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs our rest and digest states.
But the internet removes that geographic constraint entirely.
Completely. It allows for the aggregation of the long tail of human experience. When an individual connects with a hyper-niche community online, the brain's social threat detection system finally powers down.
Because they finally achieve a positive reward prediction error, but not through superficial metrics.
Exactly. They achieve it through resonance, they share an experience, and the community responds with, yes, I understand exactly what that feels like.
That phrase, I understand exactly what that feels like, that has to be one of the most powerful regulators of the human nervous system.
It really is. When we experience that synchronous validation, it triggers the release of oxytocin.
The bonding neurochemical.
Right, the chemical associated with bonding and safety. And this severely counteracts the anxiety generated by those broader comparative algorithms we talked about. For many people, finding these specialized digital enclaves leads to a robust increase in self-esteem.
That makes total sense. I kind of think of the digital space not just as a series of rooms, but as a potential exoskeleton for human connection.
An exoskeleton, I like that.
Yeah, think about it. An exoskeleton can help a paralyzed person walk. It basically bypasses their physical limitations.
Right.
In the same way, a highly curated digital environment can bypass the geographic and physical limitations of our real lives, allowing us to build a supportive psychological architecture that we otherwise just couldn't access.
That's a great way to put it. But the key word in your analogy is curated.
Curated, yes.
Because an exoskeleton only works if it is precisely calibrated to the user's dimensions. If it's poorly calibrated, it will literally break their bones.
Wow, okay.
This is why the sources insist the impact of social media is entirely dependent on the specific ecology of your feed.
So let's talk about that ecology. Because if I populate my feed with aspirational content celebrities, ultra-wealthy entrepreneurs, fitness models, I am voluntarily subjecting myself to maximum cognitive dissonance.
You're feeding your medial prefrontal cortex a diet of absolute scarcity. You're telling it, look at all these people who have outcompeted you.
Which triggers all those threat responses.
Exactly. Conversely, if you aggressively prune your feed,
Aggressively.
yes, to include only educational content, supportive niche communities, and peers who practice radical vulnerability.
Meaning they post their failures as often as their successes.
Right. If you do that, you are fundamentally reprogramming your digital ecology. You are retraining your brain's predictive model to expect connection rather than competition.
This transitions us perfectly into the final and probably most crucial section of our deep dive, the tactical application.
The actionable steps.
Yes, because the sources don't just leave us with theory. They provide a literal schematic for reclaiming your self-esteem from algorithmic determinism. And it starts with what they call intentional consumption.
Intentional consumption is all about re-engaging the prefrontal cortex before the limbic system can take over.
Which is hard because most digital consumption is driven by a desire to self-soothe, isn't it?
Absolutely. We feel a spike of anxiety, boredom, or loneliness. And without even thinking, our thumb just finds the app icon.
We are seeking a quick dopamine hit to numb the uncomfortable emotion. It's a digital pacifier.
That's exactly what it is. And to break this, the sources suggest creating what they call digital speed bumps.
Digital speed bumps, I like that.
You have to introduce friction into a system that was specifically designed to be frictionless.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, before opening the app, you force a moment of conscious interrogation. You ask yourself, what is my specific objective right now? Are you looking for a specific piece of information? Are you intentionally seeking connection with a specific community? Or are you just avoiding the silence of the room you're currently in?
And just the act of asking that question requires executive function, which effectively wrestles the steering wheel away from the automatic, habit-driven basal ganglia.
Precisely.
But I want to introduce a tactic here that builds on the curation aspect we just discussed. We've talked about pruning the feed, but I want to suggest a ruthless, immediate feed audit.
Okay, how do you define a feed audit in a practical sense?
Well, it's an exercise in neurohacking your own environment. You sit down, you open your primary platform, and you scroll deliberately.
With intention.
Yes. And for every single account that appears, you monitor your somatic response, your physical reaction. You don't overthink it. Does looking at this person's content make your chest feel lighter, or does it make your stomach tighten?
Oh, that's interesting.
Does it inspire curiosity, or does it trigger that silent question, am I enough?
So you are relying on the physical sensation, the gut reaction,
Yeah.
rather than logical rationalization.
Exactly, because your body knows before your brain does. If an account, even if it's a close friend, a family member, or a colleague, triggers a tightening, a sense of inadequacy, you unfollow or mute them instantly. No guilt, no apologies. People often feel this strange social obligation to consume content that actively harms their mental health simply because they know the person in real life.
Which is absurd when you say it out loud.
Right. You have no moral obligation to let someone else's highlight reel damage your psychological baseline.
That is a profound act of boundary setting. And computationally, by aggressively muting or unfollowing, you are starving the algorithm of the engagement data it uses to serve you comparative content.
You're cutting off its food supply.
You are. You are forcing the machine learning model to recalculate its assumptions about what keeps you on the platform.
But the sources make a really critical point here. Curation only stops the bleeding.
Right. It removes the immediate triggers.
But to actually rebuild and sustain self-esteem, we have to look outside the digital ecosystem entirely.
Yes, we have to talk about recalibrating the dopamine baseline through real-world, high-friction experiences.
This is the concept of building an emotional immune system, because the digital validation economy is highly volatile.
Oh, extremely. If your self-worth is entirely staked on digital metrics, you are essentially a day trader operating on margin. The slightest dip in the market will wipe you out.
Because digital roots are inherently shallow. I mean, you can lose a digital community overnight to an algorithm change, a random ban, or just a shift in platform popularity.
Precisely. To build resilience against that volatility, you need neurofeedback that the digital world simply cannot provide.
Things like proprioception.
Yes, proprioception, the awareness of your body in space. Sustained eye contact, shared physical exertion.
So like playing a sport with friends.
Exactly. When you engage in a challenging physical hobby, when you volunteer in your local community, or when you sit face-to-face with a friend for 2 hours without looking at a screen.
You are engaging in slow, sustained, high-effort reward pathways.
Yes. You are earning your dopamine the way the brain evolved to earn it, through tangible physical reality.
So when you fix a broken appliance with your own hands, or you hike a really difficult trail, the sense of confidence you feel isn't subject to an algorithm.
Nobody can downvote the fact that you climbed the mountain.
I love that. Nobody can downvote that you climbed the mountain.
And that undeniable physical competence creates a robust internal baseline. When your real-world roots are deep, you possess a reservoir of intrinsic value.
So when you eventually log back online and experience that inevitable negative reward prediction error,
When a post gets ignored, or you see someone else's massive success,
right, it doesn't threaten your core identity. The digital wind might rustle your branches, but it cannot uproot you because your sense of self is anchored in physical reality.
that brings everything full circle beautifully.
Let's synthesize the architecture of what we've mapped out today. We started by diagnosing the neurobiological mismatch, right?
Right, how platforms exploit our evolutionary hypervigilance for social hierarchy.
And how they create a subconscious crisis of comparison that our logical brains are simply too slow to intercept.
Then we examine the mechanics of the validation economy. We dissected how variable reward schedules compress human connection into unstable dopamine loops.
And why our awareness of this manipulation doesn't immunize us against the pain of digital rejection.
But we refuse to end in digital nihilism.
We did. We explored how, when stripped of its aspirational toxicity, the same technology can act as an exoskeleton for connection.
Allowing us to find those hyper-niche communities that lower our threat responses and validate our unique realities.
And finally, we outlined the specific protocols for taking back control. inserting friction through intentional consumption, executing ruthless feed audits to hack our digital ecology.
And ultimately diversifying our self-worth portfolio by investing heavily in the undeniable competence of the physical world.
As we wrap up this deep dive, the research leaves us with a fascinating litmus test for our own behavior. It really challenges us to examine the hidden intent behind our digital actions.
It does.
So our expert here has a final provocation for you to consider.
Yeah. The next time you find yourself framing a photo or typing out an update and you're hovering your thumb over the post button, stop and investigate your own internal state.
Just take a breath.
And ask yourself, am I offering this piece of myself to share a genuine moment with a community I care about? Or am I deploying this into the void, asking the internet for permission to feel good about myself today?
Are you sharing a moment or asking an algorithm for permission to exist? That is a brutal, necessary question to carry with you. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. We challenge you to execute that feed audit today, to introduce that friction, and to step away from the screen long enough to build something tangible in the physical world. Until next time, protect your focus, curate your environment, and take care of your digital space.